When we started the course, we learned that sociology is the study of social life, and that social life is the dynamic relationship between social systems and individuals. We also talked about how social systems come in two major forms: culture and social institutions. We might think of this model as looking a little bit more like this, in the way that social institutions and culture and individuals are all dynamically interacting with and related to one another. Now, for the last few weeks, we've spent most of our time examining culture. We looked at what culture is and how we are socialized into it. We explored a variety of ways we make meaning in the world around us, a core facet of how culture works in our lives. Some of those ways of making meaning stem from social institutions like the media, religion, and even government agencies. We also looked some at how culture can be built from the ground up, such as when we explored how people understand what counts as family and what sorts of things they consider deviant. And along the way, we've explored some of our dominant cultural trends concerning major axes of experience and identity, from race to gender to sexual identities to our political ideologies about things like abortion. Though we've covered a lot of ground, in many ways, we've really just scratched the surface. There are plenty of other topics we could interrogate to better understand how culture operates as a social force in our lives. And it's not like we're totally leaving this behind. In the units to come, we'll periodically think about how the meanings we generate in our world contribute to some of the different problems we face. So though we're moving into a new broad unit, the insights you've gained over the last few weeks will be useful parts of your sociological toolkit moving forward. And if you've been intrigued by any of these topics and want to explore them further, there are a variety of other sociology courses you could take that will let you do so. The same can be said for many of the topics we're yet to reach. Thus is the nature of an introductory course in any field. Part of its purpose is to introduce you to the basics of what a particular field entails, in the hopes that you'll be prepared for other more substantive courses you may choose to take later on. We're now about to turn to that other major social system, social institutions, or sometimes called social structures. We started to do this in our last class when we looked at some of the structural barriers faced by sexual minorities. We're going to get more explicit in this regard in our next class by returning to the topic of deviance, which we visited a few weeks ago, but looking at how deviance intersects with crime. Recall that we defined deviance as the violation of a social norm, but we also said that the violation of a legal social norm is a specific subset of deviance, which we call crime. So we'll think about different types of crimes and the ways in which enforcement of these legal norms is quite literally an act of the state as a social institution. We'll talk a bit about why some crimes get prosecuted and others don't, and we'll look at the U.S. criminal justice system and explore some of the disparities and uneven outcomes found there. Then next week, we'll look at how social institutions writ large generate a variety of social inequalities. Now, there are a lot of social inequalities we could explore, but we'll spend our time focused on two particularly salient and enduring dimensions, those of race and gender. What we'll see is that the real root of inequality is about more than just prejudice or bias. It is instead at core a result of systematically uneven outcomes that stem from the ways in which we set up our various social institutions. Following our sessions on inequality, we'll turn to an exploration of a variety of specific social institutions. We'll seek to understand how they operate in society, what functions they serve, and how we interface with them. Specifically, we will explore the media, the state and civil society, as well as taking some time to hone in on what political participation looks like. We'll look at healthcare, and we'll also look at the economy. We'll then return to our discussion of inequality by looking at inequalities that manifest from the way our economic system operates, specifically what we call class stratification and poverty. And then we'll round out this broad unit on social institutions by looking at the ways in which many of these institutions contribute to the phenomenon known as globalization. We have an exciting few weeks ahead. In some ways, I would argue, even more exciting than what we've already covered. As one of my favorite radio broadcasters says, all of that and more coming up. Stick around.
That and more this week on Living on Earth. Stick around.